As an actress, her beauty, grace, and remarkable talent earned her 5 Golden Globe nominations for her role in the classic show Heart to Heart. So please welcome my friend, Miss Stefanie Powers. Such an angel.
I want you to have this because it's, you know, my house in Africa is called Elephant Walk, and I found this backstage.
I know.
It would be very nice to add to the scene.
That is so kind of you to give me something that already I own. But I really appreciate it. Get in here, Stephanie.
I'm glad. Well, it's thrifty.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah, we're going to talk all about your Wildlife Foundation a little later. But before that, I want to thank you just for coming today.
Well, this is a delight.
And sharing
You know,
this.
we never spend enough time together.
Never, because we're always working
here,
which is great.
Yeah.
But, you know, Heart to Heart, which I had the good fortune to appear on.
Well, we almost didn't appear because
I know, we laughed so hard.
ourselves so silly. I mean, we couldn't finish a scene. We couldn't finish a sentence.
I know.
It was so silly there. They were starting to separate us.
I know, but it was so much fun.
It was great.
But you and R.J. Wagner honestly had such great chemistry. So many people thought you were actually married.
Well, we were, but to other people.
Right.
So
I know, but that's how wonderful you were together.
We had such a great time, you know. I mean, you remember.
It was amazing.
I don't think any of those things, when those things happen and people click like that, I don't think that it's anything
you can
plan or even write, because we all have lots of friends that we've worked with, lots of friends that we know who are fellow actors, and it doesn't always follow suit that you're going to automatically click when you have that. And you know, it's a both RJ and I we were raised in the movie system.
Right.
You know, in the old movie system. I got on the tail end of it. He was earlier. But I think that one of those, one of the offshoots of that training was that you were supposed to be generous enough to hit the ball back over the net.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And when the Actors Studio came in and all the new, well, you remember in being an actress in New York, when the real theater and all of this and me and mine and all of method acting, it became very insular and it became very self-involved to the extent that it stopped being communicative. And I think that was kind of perhaps because we had both come from that background that it might have contributed to our rapport.
You knew how to listen. Isn't that wonderful and kind of rare these days? But Heart to Heart is still, I think, so famous. People love it. Why do you think it still resonates? Yeah, on TV.
Well, I would like to think, I would hope to think that it's a little bit about the romance. It's about the love, the fact that, you know, we never did sort of kitchen sink drama.
Right.
It was always just these two people who were in love. They were adults, they had chosen to be together, they didn't have to justify anything, they didn't, and the network was always going mad because they were always saying, well, we've got to have him have an affair, and she has to have a baby and lose the baby, and oh my God, all this very dramatic stuff, and you know, that wasn't what we were about. RJ used to say, and I don't know if he said this to you when he was on your show, but he used to say at the beginning of the year, what kind of scripts we'd be looking for. And the archetype episode of Heart to Heart was that it opened and we were having dinner beautifully dressed in evening clothes at a lovely restaurant, and we exit the restaurant and Max is there with the door open to the Rolls Royce, and RJ turns to me and says, darling, it's a beautiful evening, the moon is out, shall we walk across the park? Yes, darling, let's do that. Max, meet us on the other side. So we walk across the park, and as we stop to kiss in the moonlight, out of the tree falls a dead body. And then RJ leans down to see that the body is dead, and the lights go on, and the police are there, and they say, you're arrested for the murder of this man. That was Heart to Heart.
Yes.
So we didn't have to, we had to react to the situation, but we could invent our own fantasies and romance, and I think the world is lacking.
The fact that it was so romantic, and you did things like that.
And we loved each other. God, what a novel idea.
How did you first get signed at Columbia, wasn't it?
It was, well, I had auditioned. When I was, the summer, you know how you always grew over the summer. The summer I was 15, heading toward my 16th birthday, I grew in leaps and bounds to be almost as tall as I am now.
Wow.
And I used to go to, I was too tall for ballet, so I used to take jazz class at the American School of Dance with Matt Maddox. I don't know if you remember him.
Very well.
Oh, man had to leave the United States because he had too many paternity suits. He was the most gorgeous man. Straight dancer, gorgeous red hair. Oh,
and a great dancer. Great dancer.
Gorgeous. All the little girls were in love with Matt Maddox. So we all took his class.
Yes.
And there was another girl in class who was a year older than I, and she could drive. So whenever they would post all the auditions for all the shows that would come to town on the board at the ballet school, she would drive, and we would go together. And we were always kept till the end because we were tall.
Right.
And, you know, they never look at dancers' faces. They look at their feet, or they see how they move. And the girl with the clipboard would come around, and she'd say, "How old are you?" And we'd stand up very tall and say, 17. And she'd say, "Out."
You're lying.
And so in that same vein, we went to an audition for the movie West Side Story. And I was called back 15 times.
Oh, my goodness.
16 dance auditions and 3 screen tests. And then they said, go get a work permit and start rehearsals. So here I was, a Hollywood, California kid with all of these New York actors and dancers, and they all looked, now that I look at the movie, everybody looks clean cut, but at the time they looked so scruffy.
Right,
you know,
right.
They really looked like hoods. And think where we've come from, my God. And so I was thrown into an extraordinary group of extremely talented people.
Oh, my goodness.
To work for Jerome Robbins.
And I think one of the toughest choreographers of all. If you could dance for Jerome Robbins, you had to be great.
I have my Jerome Robbins knees.
I'm sure.
Still.
Yeah.
I think.
George Chakiris was here.
Was he? Oh,
talking about his knees as well.
Oh,
yeah.
dear. Terrible. But that was glorious. However, I was fired because I was too young, and I was the only young one on that. I was the only one that young on the film. So it was too restrictive. You had to have every 4 hours you had to go to school, and
so much of a
parent
break
and a guardian and so many breaks. So, but I met somebody who was a director.
Yeah, there was a kind of a lucky break. You ran into this famous director.
No, I actually what allowed me to go to Columbia was an actor-director called Tom Laughlin, who liked to work with people who had not had much experience. Right. And Tom asked me to play a role in his film. And the film was shown around at various studios. And they invited me to come and join their studio system. And it was a sort of invitation to work with the contract players at the various studios in order to create a scene or do a scene for a potential long-term contract. Well, at the time, Sandy Meisner was teaching at 20th Century Fox.
Amazing.
Zena Provendy was at MGM, and she was a protege of Stella Adler's. And Les Mahoney was at Columbia, and I was going to these. I mean, I was the most employed, out-of-work actress in Hollywood. It was fantastic, and I was driving onto the lot saying hi, as if I belonged. It was quite amazing. And one day I was late for class at Columbia, and I was running through the hallways where they had swinging doors, and I literally smashed into somebody who was wearing the same sunglasses I was, which doesn't sound very interesting, except in those days, if something was really the latest thing on the French Riviera, it took about 3 years to get to California. And he said, where did you get those glasses? And I said, well, my friend Lance Ventlo brought them to me from Monte Carlo. He was driving in the Monte Carlo rally. And I said, where did you get yours? And he said, I was at the Monte Carlo rally.
Oh.
So it was very competitive, always. And he said, what do you do here? And I said, well, I'm an actress. And he said, are you any good? And I said, well, of course, yes. Yes, I am, I think, yes. And he said, well, I'm making a movie here, so you should come and see me. And I said, well, I'm late for class. I can't come to see you now. He said, well, come after class. And so when I went to class, he said, my name, by the way, is Blake Edwards.
Oh, gosh. How, there are no accidents. It was meant to be. How wonderful.
I guess.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely wonderful.
My honor is at stake.
Well, now, Your Honor.
Absolutely. He impugned my honor.
Impugned? What does that mean?
Slander. He slandered my honor.
He did?
I said what I said, and I'll stand by it to the death.
He admits it, see? Shoot him.
Well, what is he admitting to?
Why, he called me a... I won't even repeat the word.
I didn't necessarily call you anything, but I said what I said, and I'll stand by it to the death.
Well, just for the tally books, what did you say?
I said that any girl who would permit a man to kiss her before they're formally engaged is a trollop.
He said it again. Shoot him.
Now, hold on.
No, don't hold on. If you're my father, if you love me, you'll shoot him.
Well, I'm your father, and I sure love you. So?
Oh, you shot him. You really shot him.
Welcome back. That was a clip of my guest, the lovely and talented actress Stefanie Powers. Well, with John Wayne and McClintock, and now joining her is another wonderful actor. This is her dog. This is her dog.
She's making herself comfortable.
Bounce, of course. I don't blame her. We want you to be comfortable, Bounce. Well, your love of animals led you to create the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, which I contribute to. I think it's a fantastic organization because I read about the wonderful work you do. How much time are you able really to dedicate to it now?
Well, you know, Florence, it is a lifelong dedication. It is not something I took on frivolously, and nor do I assume the responsibilities without fully accepting cradle to grave. You know,
right.
I helped create this, and it was after Bill's death, and Bill. Many people remember William Holden as the great actor, but few people remember him as a great conservationist long before the word conservation was even in popular use. And he went out to Africa in the 1950s as a hunter and took one look at a Garanook, which is a very tall, long-necked, beautiful, big-eyed, gorgeous antelope, which he shot. And he went over and picked her face up and said, "Oh my God, I've just killed Audrey Hepburn." Oh. And he stopped shooting and began to realize that the herds were diminishing as the population of human beings was going to increase. And he listened to some of the people who were professional hunters but / conservationists long before the word was even in use. In the 1960s, and created an idea which was unique in his part of Africa, which is Kenya in East Africa, and that was to create a game ranch, which had never been done at the time. And for not only the protection, but the breeding of animals, that he would create nucleus breeding herds of animals and ship them to zoos and zoological parks all over the world for gene pool refreshing. In fact, here at the Los Angeles Zoo, we have a population of a beautiful antelope called a bongo. It's indigenous to a mountain, Mount Kenya, which is where I live. I live on the slopes of Mount Kenya, and it's where the game ranch was that Bill founded. He and his partner, Don Hunt, captured 20 bongo and shipped them some of them to Los Angeles and some of them to Cincinnati. From that nucleus of 20, over 400 have been born in this country, while they are now extinct on Mount Kenya. So 3 years ago, the 13 zoos that have bongo in this country collaborated with us, with the Mount Kenya Wildlife Conservancy and the William Holden Wildlife Foundation. We are kind of sister organizations, which is the game ranch that Bill originally started, and the education division, which I started after his death. And 13 animals were shipped from the United States back to us, and they form a nucleus of a breeding stock which is going to eventually be released back onto the mountain to repopulate the mountain.
What a wonderful tribute to William Holden, and what wonderful work for everyone. I mean,
for everyone and for our heritage. The work
Exactly.
of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation is to back up specific animal preservation with education. We teach alternatives to habitat destruction. We, on site, on our 15-acre site, we have about 12,000 students this year coming through.
It's so exciting. Well, Stefanie, you've achieved worldwide fame. You've had so much success. What kind of outlook do you have on your life? I mean, are you just looking forward to the next great adventure, or?
You know, I haven't thought about this for a long time. That's an interesting question. But I remember there was a, and this might be an idea that's now maybe overused, but there was a Polish innovator in the theater called Jerzy Grotowski, who forced his actors in a very deliberate way to look for the process, not the result in all that he asked them to do. And that through the process was the discovery that would lead you to the axiom, which was going to be the result in any event. So the proof of the pudding was that once having arrived at the top of the mountain, you still look for another mountain to climb.
Right.
So it is the process that we have to be excited by. And I find that the process of life is an elixir. It's a very exciting thing, I find. Some learning things very exciting, no matter where it is. So perhaps that's what it is. I think now we've discovered that there are lots of reasons why people might or might not get Alzheimer's disease, that keeping the mind active and keeping yourself active and curious and in pursuit of things is crucial for well-being. We now know that we're going to live life a bit longer, so we better take better care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And with all of that potential, I just feel like an infant.